Hi, today I thought I would work on something I've been setting aside, had thoughts in my mind of what I wanted to do for a new journal, and I kept this pizza box. It's for just like French bread pizzas, so a little smaller than a big pizza box, but I've been keeping this because I had an idea for a journal, and I would say for months I've had this idea, so finally going to take the time and go ahead and make this today. So I'm going to cut apart this box, and we're going to be painting a journal cover, and we'll do pages for it and different things. So I think this will be fun. So what I'm doing here is I decided which side I wanted to be the binding side for this journal, and then the other sides I'm just going to cut these edges off. And I've seen some people instead of just cutting these extra edges all the way off, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, but they will like fold them in and glue them down so that it's more reinforced. And just my personal preference, I just like journals to be a little bit more lightweight and thinner. So I have done that a little bit in the past, but it does make quite a strong cover. So in this case, I'm just going to cut those edges right off, and I'm being careful to cut them off. You know how there's like a fold line? So I'm either going to go right before it or right after it, but try to stay consistent so that it's a nice straight looking journal. So I'm cutting all the edges except the one in the middle that I'm going to use for binding, and we'll deal with that in a minute here. So I'm just carefully trimming off the top and all these other sides. And now the bottom side is, like, I tend to just rip things open. Like I rip my mail open, and this, like boxes, I just rip them open. So in this case, I'm just going to trim off that uneven edge where I've just kind of ripped through it. So it'll only end up taking off about another extra inch, but it does, I like the size of it better to have it a little bit smaller. So I'm just trimming off this last edge here. And like I said, I am being careful just to stay consistent, whether I'm trimming it before or after that kind of like embossed line that we see like in, you know, packaged food and different packaging. You'll get a pretty strong line, which is nice because then, you know, you have like a cut line to deal with that's already there. And then now I'm going to use one of my favorite tools, which is the Dilutions journaling block. And this is the second version of it. I also have the first version of it, but I just always have this thing next to me. I just really love it. So it is a straight edge, and it does have markings on it, so you can actually use it as a ruler as well. And then it has like cutouts for, you can draw circles with it, and one of the edges is like a wavy edge. So you can just do all different things with it, and I really like it. I have actually sometimes made pages by tracing that wavy edge, and then I'll cut it out and I'll kind of offset all the pages so it's like a waterfall with that wavy edge. So I just really like this tool. This is absolutely one of my favorite things. So I'm just trimming this edge off here and trying to stay either on one side of the black line or the other, trying to get most of it off. But in this case, since we'll be painting over it, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm just going to line this up and make sure that everything's looking square. And it can be a little bit difficult because you have like a binding edge here, which just kind of, you know, you can kind of finagle it into different like so that it's not quite straight. So anyway, I'm just doing my best to straighten this bottom edge out and make sure the journal will lay flat. And we'll be changing this binding area in a minute, but I just want to get it as flat as I can at this point and straight and square. So I'm going to put some paper on the edges of this journal, and this is just like craft paper that's like scrapbook paper. So I'm just taking the piece that I have and I'm just cutting it in half here, and I'm going to trim it to the height of this journal, and then I'm just going to glue a line on one side and then fold it around to the other side. I'm not too worried about whether, they're equal on both sides so much, but just trying to get like an edge here. So I'm putting this craft paper edge on, and I did think about whether or not I should do a like a washi tape edge, but what I thought is that since I'm painting this journal, that the paper would take these different mediums a little more evenly with the actual cardboard. So a different time I might try a washi tape, but I just thought that it might not absorb the paint as well as this craft paper. So I'm just trying this, and like I said, on a different project I might do something different, but in this case I just want a nice paper edge, and it will show through all the layers of paint for sure, but I just think it will give a nice like old book kind of a look to it. And I suppose I did think about even doing like fabric, and again on a different project I might try something like that and just see how that turns out, because that would also give me kind of the look that I'm going for. So I'm just trimming that even with the top, lining it up at the bottom and then trimming it off at the top to just get the right height here. And then I'm just adding lines of glue to glue this down, and then I'll go back and try to get as close as I can to the edge to make sure that is glued down really well so it doesn't peel back or anything. So I do think it's funny, some papers are a little bit more resistant to glue than other papers, and this one is. It's almost got a bit of a waxy finish in it, so it is giving me a little bit of a trouble just getting it nice and flat and glued down. But I still think this will take the paint really well, and different mediums, because I'm also doing the oxides, and I just think this craft paper will just absorb that really well. So just eyeballing this, trying to get it somewhat even on both sides. And I'm using the art glitter glue just so that it will bond pretty quickly. And this art glitter glue doesn't give much distortion, so that I think will also help keep these sides flat. So this is just an extra step I'm taking, because I find that when I do like a cardboard box journal, that I do need to do something on these edges just to keep them from bending or anything like that. So these edges are going to get completely covered up in paint, so you're not going to see that it's actually craft paper. So I'm just getting this glued down as close to the edge as I can. And I'm going to start working on this before this is dry. So like I said, I do kind of anticipate that this might wrinkle or different things, but I'll just try to work with it as I go along. And then I think once it's 100% dry, the paper might shrink up a little bit, and it might look a little better, or more part of the cover. So I had in my mind for a while that I was going to do like a charcoal gray kind of a cover. So those are the colors that I've pulled here, and I've just pulled different colors, and I figure I'll just see what I want to use as things go along. So this is how I do a cover. Like I've seen people use like cake mix. They'll use like that type of a box, and I use pizza boxes. I've used a cake box before, or like a box of pasta, like that kind of a size. And what I do is I look at the binding side, the one that I left intact, and I just try to figure out like how wide I want it. And then what I will do is I will cut a straight line in this border or binding area. And the one side, that's going to be the actual side of the journal. So in this case, it's about a 1/2 inch. And then the other side, I will, if I need to, I'll trim it smaller so that kind of side 1 fits into side 2, if that makes sense. So I'm just trimming this a little bit smaller, and it's going to fit inside of the border, the binding area that has the size that I wanted it to be. So let's say that I wanted it 1 inch. I would cut one side of this 1 inch, and then the other side I would cut it smaller than 1 inch, and that way I can glue one inside of the other. And that way it just helps me to kind of visualize exactly how big I want the journal to be, because that affects how many pages I'm going to put in it. And also, if you have like a larger journal, it acts different, it behaves different, like when you put it on the bookshelf and stuff. So I tend to make, more often I'm making thinner journals that are about like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. But sometimes I will make a large journal, especially if I use like the binding rings that you can get from, like Tim Holtz used to sell those binding rings. And I don't know if they do still or not. But I do use larger boxes, and then I will put those, it's almost like notebook rings, and there's 2 of them. So I have done some of those journals lately as well. And that has to be like a certain size. So here you can see I've glued them together, and they're kind of squishing together too much. So I'm going to have to keep adjusting it so that the one side that I use as my guide, you can see it's kind of sticking out. That I make sure that that second side that fits inside of it is pulled out enough that there's nothing sticking out. So that way when it's done, the actual binding area is exactly what I wanted, which in this case is around a 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to keep adjusting while that glue is still drying, and just make sure that nothing's sticking out here. So I'll let this sit for not too long, just enough that as I'm moving it around, it's not going to keep sliding around. But this is one thing that's good about the art glitter glue, is that it dries quickly and it doesn't give you any kind of like distortion that other glues can give you. So it will stay nice and straight. So the art glitter glue only takes like, a couple minutes to be solid enough and to bond enough that I won't need to worry about moving it around. Because right now the glue on the sides and the glue on this binding area, I'm just gonna glue it and then keep moving on and keep adding things to it. So I'm not gonna let it sit and dry for hours or anything like that. So I'm just giving this enough time where it's not gonna move around. So I have found with other glues, like I use the, clear Elmer's glue. I use that sometimes, and I use the Aleene's glue. And for me, they just take longer to set enough that I can actually keep working with the project. And that's, like I said, one thing good about this art glitter glue is that it sets up in about a minute or 2. Not fully, but enough that you can work with it and it's not going to be like messed up. So here I'm just taking like a flat black acrylic paint, and a lot of paints that I got from AC Moore, which was a craft store in my area that went out of business. And I'll tell you that it still pains me that store went out of business, because that was one of my favorite places to go and favorite places to buy things. So I used to have, I think it was an AC Moore right next to a Michael's, and that was so amazing, with the Joann's nearby. So that was like the golden age. And I think it was like since everything we've gone through in the past few years, I think that the store closed around then. So that was sad. But I have a lot of the paints left that I bought from there, so that is good. So this is just, as I said, it's like a flat black. And as I'm painting it, it looks like it's super shiny, but it's not a gloss paint. It's a very flat black. But I am painting the paper on the side here, but not too much, because I figure as time goes by and different mediums go down, it'll eventually get covered up. I'm more concerned right now about painting over the pizza box part of it so that you can't really see that. And of course it's like bright red, so it's going to take a couple coats. And it's kind of funny because you can see there's like little letters showing through, and those are like embossed. Some of this is almost embossed through it, so no matter what layers I added, I'm probably still going to see a little bit of that, which I guess is kind of fun, but there it is. And I'm just sticking away from that glued binding area just for a few more minutes, and then I'll be painting over it. So I'm using my heat gun here, and you can see it go from that glossy wet finish down to the flat matte black, which is not where it's going to end up, but this is like the first coat. So, but it's doing a really good job covering up most of that pizza box design, so that's cool. So going on a second coat here, and it's really covering up that box, which is nice. And one thing I'm just taking care to do is just making sure that I don't have like a big glop of paint on the inside, and then if it dries, it's just going to always be there, and I'm never going to be able to get rid of it. So as I paint for a while, then I'll go inside the journal and just make sure there's nothing too crazy going on the inside of the journal. And then I can just clean it up. So in this case, I'm going to do both the front and the inside. I'll do it similar enough that I don't have to worry about, let's say I was going to paint the inside like pure white, and I'm painting the outside pure black. I mean, you're just asking for trouble because something from the inside is going to leak to the outside or whatever. So in this case, I'm just doing inside and out, basically like a charcoal gray or a black, and that way I don't have to worry too much about getting one messed up with the other. So I'm just going to dry this really well before I move on to the next coat. And you can see it's going from that super shiny black, which I think actually looks really nice, to this really flat matte black. And we'll be adding some metallic in here so that it won't end up this flat black sheen, but it definitely is doing a good job covering up that pizza box. So, and other craft paints that I have, I mean, I could paint 6 layers and it still wouldn't be covering it up. So it is kind of nice to have a paint that's covering this up so well, so quickly. So I'm just adding some more paint to the back here. And I'm doing, I would say, a generous coat of paint, although I am trying to keep it thin, because when I put down thick layers, I just tend to have more issues with like lines showing through, or, paint pooling in one area. So I'm just trying to do a nice thin layer and make sure that I, get rid of those brush strokes. And I do love painting different things, whether it's the journal covers or tags or the pages for a journal. I really enjoy painting. I feel like it's a nice therapeutic thing. And then I can just, paint, let's say 3 or 4 different pages or areas. And then I have enough like plastic where I can just lay them down, let them dry till the next day if I'm not going to use my heat tool. And even if I use my heat tool, I'm still laying it out on, like some kind of a plastic surface, or like a craft mat or something, just so that it gets good and dry. And then, I might leave it there overnight, and then the next day I'll come back to it. So I tend to keep like plastic packaging. Like let's say I buy like a 12 by 12 stencil, or sometimes you're buying stickers or something that comes in a 12 by 12 plastic sleeve. Then I will just keep that, and I will do whatever projects I'm doing, I will just end up putting that, like I'll lay it out on my floor. I have like a tile floor. So if I get a little paint on it, it's not, I can just wipe that up. But I will put like plastic down, and then when I'm done painting things, I would just lay them out on the floor or on top of like a box or something. And that way I can let them just sit and dry overnight or for a few hours. And then when I go back to it, you know, I was able to do several sheets, because when you're doing a lot of painting, I feel like one of the things that I need to plan ahead is just, where am I going to let these things dry? So I try to keep like that plastic, and then I will use it for like repeatedly until it's just not in a state I can use it anymore, and then I'll throw it away and just put out some more packaging. So it's kind of a nice thing to just keep a drawer of that around if you're going to be doing a lot of like painting in your journals. And then if it's like, let's say those plastic sheets are dry, you can even put them between journal pages. Like if you're doing art journaling where you're painting on them, I just have to make sure that they are completely dry so that I'm not getting paint from an old project on my new project. But that is kind of a nice thing to do, is to keep some of that plastic packaging. It's a good way to kind of reuse things. Now, if I had like carpet or flooring where I thought it would kind of create a problem, obviously I wouldn't be doing that. Since I have tile, I can just kind of lay it down. And like I said, if I have, you know, paint gets on the floor or something, it's just, for me, it's as easy as wiping it up or scrubbing it or something. So that works out pretty well. But it is nice to have all that set up before you start painting, because I find once I start painting and have a bunch of things that are all wet and then I have no idea where to put them, then I'm kind of scrambling to figure out how to accommodate all of that. So now we're on the inside here, and I'm just going to do another layer of that flat black paint. So it's nice on the inside. Obviously I don't have to do as many coats to get coverage here. So again, I'm just trying to really even it out and make sure there's no like painting lines between everything, because if there are, it's really hard to get rid of those. They just keep going through layer after layer. So this paint has a really good consistency. It's just thinner, I think, than most paints, but yet it covers really well. So this is a pretty nice, it's just a real cheapo craft paint, but it's, I don't know, it's a really nice one. I think it's nice to go to the craft store and just try a different brand of paint, and then you can experiment and just see like how you like the texture of it, and you know, the different qualities of it, because I think we all have different taste. But once you find a brand that you like, then it's kind of nice to branch out and try their different products. But I do think that's a good way of being able to get the results that you want. If you just try different brands of paint, or maybe there are different lines of paint, and just find something that you're happy with, and then, you know, you'll have more success getting the results that you're looking for. And again, we're all different. So like things that I like, other people may not like as much. Like I know some people really love to paint with gesso as their first layer. And I think that's something where I need to try some different brands, because I just haven't had as good of a luck with using gesso as your first layer. And I just think that's something where maybe I just need to try some different brands and figure out, you different mediums that work for me and the results that I'm trying to get, because I think that we're all trying to do different things and have things turn out a certain way. And I do think it helps to just keep experimenting and trying different things until you get the looks that you want. And that's part of the fun of being a crafter and an artist. I mean, crafters are definitely artists in my opinion. And I don't know, I just love it when I see other people crafting and they're just using completely different products than what I use. And then I can see the kind of results they get and see if that's something that I want to try. Because the wonderful thing about it is there's so many different options for us. And a lot of craft supplies are not very expensive. So it's something that you can kind of just try one here and there and see if that works for you. But that's definitely part of the fun of it. And, I don't know about you, but I have craft supplies that go from like these really inexpensive craft paints, and then I have some other watercolors that are like more expensive, but I really enjoy like buying the different brands and the different lines and just seeing the kinds of things that I like. And sometimes it lines up with what other people's favorites are, kind of like the popular favorites. And then sometimes it doesn't, and I'm going in a totally different direction where maybe other people aren't liking it so much. But I just think that's one of the great things about being a crafter, is just experimenting with these different products and different mediums. But I do really think it is therapeutic to paint, and especially like paint in layers. And also I think it's nice to just be painting on like a pizza box or something, that if I really don't like how it turns out, it's not a big deal. I can just throw it out. So it's like there's no heavy stress involved. It's like, just something fun. And I do think that's one of the great things about junk journaling, is that, some things will work and some things won't work, but the whole process is just a fun process. So I've said I'm a quilter, and I heard one of like a famous quilt teacher, she was saying that one of her biggest skills was the ability to understand when something isn't working and then like literally throw it in the trash. And of course we're talking quilts, so that's, at that point you've invested money and fabric and time and all of those things. But I find, like, after I heard that, I thought that is so true, because certain things you want to keep around in case, you're just like in a bad mood that day or something, it's not working, and then later it seems to work. So I'm not saying, throw things out at the first sign of trouble, definitely not that. But sometimes it is really helpful to just realize when something is maybe not making you happy, and it's actually giving you a little bit of stress. And then if it's just not working, it's okay to put it aside and maybe decide later about it. But if something is just not working, it's okay to just throw it out and just do something different and maybe start something new. Like that, if you give yourself permission to do that, sometimes it's really helpful to just kind of clear the deck. I think that's a really helpful thing. And, let's say you've made, sometimes I'll make like different embellishments or something, and when I go back to it, it's just not giving me a great feeling about it. So I'll set it to the side, and then if I'm thinking the same way, 2 or 3 different times I see it, then I'll just go ahead and get rid of it, and then I can just move on to something new that really inspires me. But we all have those moments, so I think it's good to kind of know when it's happening, and then you can just kind of move on from that. So now I have gotten out some Prima paint. It's called Art Alchemy paint, and it's just an acrylic. And this color is called Dark Velvet, but you can see it's a real black purple color. And my intention here is just to have like parts of this showing through. So other layers will end up covering this up. I wasn't going for any kind of like a purple journal or anything, but just little bits of this will peek through the layers that I'm planning on doing after this, but I just think it'll give it a really nice look. So this is metallique paint, and like I said, it's the color Dark Velvet, but I really love this color paint, and I have different paints from that line of Prima. So I also have some like Opal Magic, really I was gonna say fluorescent. It's not a fluorescent paint, but it's just they have just like really nice effects in them. So metallic or shimmery, different colors. So that's a really fun line of paint that Prima put out a few years ago. So I'm just getting this all, just like trying to make it a nice thin coat so that I don't have the brush marks coming through, and I'm adding some more of the matte black paint and that metallic gunmetal, and then I'm just kind of swirling all these different colors together. So all of these are acrylic paints, so they should work okay together, and I'm just giving this I just think it makes a nice effect to be painting with a couple different colors at once, and then they just kind of mix together, like not 100% mix, but just kind of swirl. So I do like how this is turning out. And I do like this more that it is a flat matte black paint. If I was using like a metallic or a real shiny high gloss black paint, I don't think I'd be liking this as much, but just like those mix of sheens I think really looks nice. And it does look completely different from when it's wet to when it's dry. Now I can see on a different project if you wanted to have like using all metallics or all high gloss things together. I also think that would look nice on some projects as well. So this project I just wanted to go like with more of an understated metallic, and it has like a suede type finish to it, which I think is really nice too. And this is going to be like a background for, I'm going to paint some flowers and some foliage on it, and then do some different embellishing to this journal, and of course add pages. So this is like trying to really work on a base layer that would set off all the other things I'm planning to do. But I do like painting this in like really dark colors. I just feel like it's pretty forgiving. So. And I apologize if you can hear my cat snoring in the background, but that's kind of a constant in my life. So. I think when I'm doing videos or crafting that she finds that very soothing. So. So I'm just getting like different spots here and just making sure that the whole journal at this point is covered in paint and can't see any pizza box through it. And then when I feel like the base layers of paint is like where I think it should be, then I'm going to move on and do some distress inking to this, which I think will be nice because distress ink just changes the texture of it, and I think it will be a really nice journal cover. So what I like to do in journal covers is just, make sure that they're kind of like soft and sueded and pliable. So not like, for me, I don't like super heavy, thick journal covers. But just something where you see it and it just makes you want to reach for it and use it. So now I am adding hickory smoke to this journal. And hickory smoke is a color that I've had for a long time, and this is a distress ink, not an oxide. And I tend to not use that color very much, but I'm really liking it on this journal. So I do have most of the distress line in both inks and oxides. I don't really have the room to store like every single color, but I will tell you some of my favorites. So one of my favorite colors that of course I wouldn't use in this project, but is dried marigold. It's just like this, like orangey pink kind of color, and I just love it. It's like one of my favorites, and I don't see people using that color very much, but that is definitely one of my favorites. But for this, for like darker things, I kind of like the darker browns, like a scorched timber, or I like the walnut stain. But for this kind of a project, we're using more of the grays to the blacks. I'm always using black soot. I use black soot a lot on different things, and then here I'm using the light color is pumice stone, and then this color that we're using right now is the hickory smoke, and I do like how all these are turning out. So, and when I buy ink pads, whether they're the regular ink or the oxide ink, I do tend to buy the reinkers right with them, and that way I do tend to have like reinkers for all these colors as well. And I find I don't need to reink my ink pads very often, but when I do, it's nice to just already have that color, and then I can also use the reinkers on different projects too, just like straight use reinkers. But I initially got a lot of the mini ink pads, because those are so easy to buy, like sets at Joann's of those. And I did get a lot of those, and I find I don't use those as much, but I do use those like for like a travel kit. And but I think I decided that as I'm using them up, I think I'm just going to switch them out to a large ink pad, because I got, I think, almost every color in those small ink pads. And in that way it is nice, but I do kind of have a lot of like doubling up. But I just find I use the larger ink pads more than those mini ink pads. So for storage wise, I think I might pare down my mini ink pads as I use them up, just to the ones that I don't have the colors in the larger ones. Because that's kind of convenient to have like much more variety of color. But then I don't have to store like the really large ink pads. I'll maybe keep those to the ones that I use quite a bit. But I do like when, Tim Holtz is coming out with like new colors here and there. And if I like the color, which, what colors don't I like? I pretty much like them all. But then I've been buying them off Amazon in like a set where they will sell the regular ink pad, the oxide ink, and then like a re-inker for both. And sometimes they will include the, it's like embossing powder, but it's the clear embossing powder of the like tinted with that color. So I've been able to get quite a few different things, like buying a set like that, and that's been pretty fun, because then I don't need to worry about tracking all the different things down. They all come in one set, so that's a nice way to buy it. And what I really like to do is get the actual ink of a color and then the oxide of the color as well. So I do like getting, both sets of that. So I find that like having all these different colors of the different inks, I really enjoy that a lot. I feel like it makes crafting really fun to have all those different colors. And like in this case, I'm using, not just a regular black, but I can kind of use all these accent colors. So I really enjoy the Ranger products and the Distress line of pretty much everything I like. But there's been some new lines that they've come out with now, which I can't really remember. I think it's called the Spritz. So I have not gotten into those yet. I'm just still using my kind of tried and true distress inks. But that is kind of a good option for me to use. I could just get like 2 or 3 and just see how that works out and go from there. So that's kind of nice. But to be honest with you, I feel like this stuff it really just gives me a lot of happiness and joy in using it. So that's why I do really like having these complete lines of distress. So this is black soot, and I'm just using that all over the journal. And I don't think it looks like much is coming off this ink pad, but it really is. It's so close to that color that the journal already is that it's a little bit hard to see. But I really like this oxide color of black soot because a lot of the oxides go really light, like when you spray them with water. And this one just stays a little bit darker, which I do really like that, and I think it looks good on this project as well. So I'm just spraying this down with water, and I'm just kind of going with how it's looking to me. So I do sometimes like this spritz kind of a look, and then at other times I'm just kind of wiping it out with my paintbrush or doing a combination of both. But if it turns out that the spritz looks good, then I'll just go ahead and dry it that way. So I do want to make sure though that there's not like pools of water sitting. But I do really like how this is turning out, and I think it's turning out better because the layers are really thin. I feel like that's really helping it to just give a nice even finish on it. So I'm just really using this heat tool to get everything nice and dry, because I don't want to turn it over and then like have something like adhere to this craft mat. This isn't exactly a craft mat, but something like a craft mat. And then I pull off a big chunk or something. So now I'm trying to be more careful about making sure that it's all really dry before I flip it over. But I really like this. It's funny. This is like exactly what I had in my mind, which doesn't usually happen, where, you know, something I kind of visualized for a while of what I wanted it to end up looking like, and then it actually is ending up exactly that way. So I'm really happy about that. But I don't know where you get your inspiration from. For me, it's like all different places. But in this case, like my tennis shoes are like a dark charcoal gray, and then it's like hot pink laces. So I don't know, for some reason that just kind of translated to doing something like this in a journal, where it's like that dark charcoal gray. And then my plan is to do like some pink flowers in here so that it just like really pops out. I'm really trying to get it in those edges that I glued together. And yeah, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to go for the effect of like this is like an old book. And I'm using like a makeup sponge to put this on. So I'm using this, and I'll use different areas of it, and then when I'm done with this, I'll just throw this out. But you see, I'm just trying to get those edges really, really good so that it just gives it more of a, like a vintage look. So I'm just going to add some sprayed water here as well. So I just keep going with this process, and when it's done, I feel like I'll kind of know that, okay, this has finally reached what I wanted to do. And basically I'm adding like all the acrylic paint base layers, and then I wanted to go through like those 3 colors of the pumice stone distress oxide, which is this light color, and then the hickory smoke, which is just the regular ink, and then the black soot distress oxide. And then I'll just keep going back and highlighting them until I feel like it looks the way I want it to look, and then I'll know that that area is done. So I'm just kind of trying to get it to my, I don't know, like when I'm looking at it in person and I'm seeing it, I can kind of tell when it needs more and then when it's finished. So, and for some reason I find it easier for me to figure out like when a background is done, even though, obviously this is a journal cover, but this is just like the background first step here. And for me, I can tell easily when a background is done, like to my opinion. Then other things, if I'm like adding things on top of it, and that's kind of where sometimes I don't know when to stop. But this background part of it, I seem to just always know, okay, now it's done. Or I know, no, this needs more. So when I paint, like I'll actually paint a lot of like printer paper, or like let's say I cut out tags or die cuts from printer paper, and I keep 2 different bags. So one of them is when I know it's like not complete. So, I might, paint for a few hours and just do different things. And then when they're totally dry, to my mind, some of them are complete and they go in the complete bag. And then the other half are not complete. I know they need more, whatever that might be. And then I throw them in the not complete bag. And then, so when I kind of am in the mood to paint, I might pull out my, let's say, half complete bag, and then I'll just be like adding whatever it needs. And then when I let that dry, then I can decide again, okay, is this complete now? Or do I need to go back and do it? But that's just kind of a fun thing for me, because I always have like a big bag of things that are like half painted or just like need more. And that way I've always got something that's kind of like ready to go. And then other times I'm in the mood to just paint a white background, and I can just like start completely fresh. So different days and different moods. But it's kind of helpful to have those things all ready to go. And then they're not for specific projects, but if like the bag that I have is for things that are completed, then I can take those and I will, usually die cut that, or I could even use it for pages and journals or something. But I know that bag is ready to go. Now in this case, I'm adding that hickory smoke ink, which is not an oxide, but I do like how that kind of darkens it. It darkens it, but it lets everything shine through, which I really like. So yeah, I'm really liking this hickory smoke. That was one that I had for years and didn't always reach for, but I do really like it. Yeah, and I love this. I'm so glad I did that purple, because when you first put it on, it's like, wow, this is going in a weird direction or something, but truthfully, with just a little bit of it showing through, I did really like it. And then I'm going to use my heat tool again and get this nice and dry before I use a different oxide, just again to keep those colors from running into each other. But I do think that this paper edge really worked. It just, I don't know, it's almost like framing this journal a little bit, but sometimes I have issues with the edges of these journals if I don't do something to them. So, but even though it's a little bit wrinkly at this point, I do think it will dry flat, but it still looks pretty nice, and it's kind of giving it an old book kind of a look to it, so I do like it. So in this video, we're going to get this cover prepared, and then in the next video, I'm going to paint the flowers on the front. So that'll be a shorter video. But in this video, I just want to get like the cover front and back with everything painted and ready, and then give it a night to dry before I move on to the next step. Because one thing with distress inks and oxides, I find that I will get everything done, and then when I come back to it the next day, then it seems to be more cured, and it's very nice the next day. Like if you give it half a day to dry, it will look really, really nice. But it definitely feels more like you can then take it and start working with it than if I start doing it right now with everything like half. It's not wet, but it's not like thoroughly dry. So I just want to give it a night to get it all thoroughly dry. But you can see like the sheen on this. It's so nice, and it's so pretty. So now I'm going to go in with some black soot, which is the oxide. And I love how these edges are more distressed than the rest of the journal. I think it looks pretty cool. So for oxides, you don't have to get them wet. I could leave it like this, but I'm going to spray it and get it wet. And then it just like has like a reaction to it, and it gives a little bit of a chalky finish in some of the areas. And since I like how this is spraying, I'm just going to go ahead and dry it like this. And then areas where there's just too much water sitting, I'm just pulling that out with the paintbrush. But you can see it's giving me some nice white-ish kind of areas. Just like intense color in some areas. So I do really like how that worked out. So this has been a lot of using my heat tool today, which again, I really like. It's just such a nice, calming thing to use. But the other day I heard Tim Holtz say to unplug this between like when you're using it. So I started doing that, because before that, mine was just plugged in all the time, because it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, if I have 2 seconds, I might want to paint something and then quick dry it with my heat tool. But so that was the one thing I had on my desk, always sitting there plugged in. But since he said to make sure they're unplugged, then I just make sure I unplug it between when I'm using it. Because I think he said some of them just like turn on their own or something. I'm not sure what it was, but it did make me laugh. But that's one thing I really like. I watched like the Tim Holtz, he does like some Saturday lives, and it's just so fun. But they definitely give you all the information. So, you know, if there's like, let's say a product where the cap doesn't fit right or something like that, they'll just let you know that, and they'll like let you know how you can deal with it. So I don't know. I just think it's so nice, because the thing about like these Tim Holtz products is they're just such good quality, especially compared to other things, even though of course I love all my craft supplies, but Tim Holtz stuff is such great quality. So if they have a little issue here and there, I'm perfectly happy to kind of like modify what I'm doing, because I don't know, it's just like everything that they have is just so nice that I don't know, like I said, the quality is just so great that it makes it all well worth it. All right, so we're finishing this front up and the insides, and then next time when we come back, I'll be painting some flowers, and we'll just get that good contrast between this nice dark journal and then some nice bright flowers. So thank you so much for watching this with me. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you grab a pizza box and you experiment with painting one yourself. It's really fun. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.